Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Cynthia Bloom.
And I'm Scott McCandless. It's the week of March 25th, and this is your Monday briefing. Before departing for its 2-week Easter recess, Congress passed legislation to avert a government shutdown. The $1.2 trillion appropriations package, which rescinds $20 billion of IRS funding, was signed into law over the weekend. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has started the process of putting the House-passed tax package on the Senate's calendar.
So, where do we go from here? Joining us to answer that question and share his insights on these recent developments is Mark Prater. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Sindhu.
So I want to start off by talking about IRS funding. And we all know that $20 billion was rescinded. And that was intended to be over 2024 and 2025. And it is going to be done sooner, FY24. I want to find out, first of all, if you're anticipating that there could be more cuts in 2025. And what are the implications of this? Because we're talking about an agency that has had staffing issues, technology issues. And so what are the implications of this $20 billion that's not going to be there?
So Sindhu, first of all, the 2025 funding bills, appropriations bills, will start processing, the law will need to be addressed almost 6 months from now. So the question is, how does this play out for that next fiscal year? What we've seen so far is the appropriations process has largely stayed within the boundaries of that debt limit deal. Under that debt limit deal, $20 billion was secured and cuts for appropriations offsets. To go beyond that, there would have to be an agreement to go beyond that debt limit deal. So I think that is a barrier and an indication of that of the possibility there is probably pretty slight. On the IRS side, operations side, under the program and the proposal, it's always been anticipated that this would be a gradual ramp up in enforcement and service, not occur right away. So the key years for funding this and keeping it in place will be in those out years, mid and out years.
Makes sense. Mark, could we talk a little bit about the OECD, and specifically House Republicans had targeted funding for the OECD as something that they might try to cut, but ultimately that was not included in the package. Can you talk a little bit about where that ended up?
The Republicans in the House and the Senate have had issues with the OECD process with respect to Pillars 1 and 2. And they've been vocal about that. And that probably played some role in the House, which of course appropriations is controlled by Republicans in the House, in the cuts that occurred there. Let's say on the Senate side that a supermajority is needed for any appropriations bill. So there would need to be supermajority support, all Republicans plus some Democrats. That does not look likely now. If Republicans keep the House, then this could be on the table again as a measure.
Mark, I want to turn to the House-passed tax bill. A majority of Senate Republicans appear to be opposed to getting it through as is. So what action on the tax bill could we expect when they return from recess?
The ball's really in Leader Schumer's court. So, as was noted earlier, he took the initial steps under what's called Rule 14 to process the House-passed tax bill. Under Rule 14, any senator can object to the referral of an introduced Senate bill or a House-passed bill to the appropriate committee of jurisdiction. It often happens. In this case, Leader Schumer did it himself, and that's not uncommon. So the bill goes to the legislative calendar, and then the leader can take the next steps, which is what's called a motion to proceed. That's a debatable motion, so it requires 60 votes in the Senate to become active. Usually it means to get the 60 votes, a cloture petition has to be filed under Rule 22. So those are the steps that the leader would have to take to move this further along in the process. And so we'll be looking out for that in the coming days, and especially when the Senate comes back, to see what Leader Schumer himself decides to do.
Mark, finally, as you said, there's a chance that they put this on the calendar when they get back April 8th, but they're away now, back in their districts. What might companies do, or what do you suggest they consider doing during this period to try to help move that forward when they get back?
Scott, I think companies really need to drive home the negative consequences of inaction to them, kind of consistent with some of the policy basis for the tax base that Republicans agreed to in the front end of the TCJA bill. So the arguments would be, for instance, with respect to R&D amortization. If you stay with the current law on R&D amortization and don't go back to the former policy, then you're going to have negative consequences for R&D. Similarly, with respect to the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, or EBITDA standard in the interest limitation, if you don't go back to the EBITDA standard, you're going to have less investment. And then finally, on bonus depreciation, if they do not seamlessly extend full bonus depreciation, you get less investment. So there's an old saying that if you want less of something, tax it. And so I would think that companies would want to go to the key members, in this case, mostly Republicans that haven't indicated whether they would support processing the bill or not. Go to those members and say, do you want less of this or more of it? And make the case that the policy is appropriate.
Makes sense. Mark, thank you so much for your insights and your advice. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. And for our viewers, you'll find in the description of this episode a link to the latest Week in Review with Pam Olson. And stay tuned for another Week in Review coming up this Friday.
And if you're looking for content more global in nature, we filmed a series of interviews at PwC's 7th Annual International Tax Conference earlier this month. Those episodes can be found on the Policy on Demand website and will come to you in a separate email this week. That does it for us this Monday. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a great week. Take care.